At this Soweto mall, 10 people lost their lives in a stampede. Local residents stormed the center and looted what they could. Nokutula Mazibuko lost her mother.
She actually took her last breath.
I can't say much because she died in my arms. So that whole picture keeps playing in my mind. I was telling my dad that I wish that day of the 11th of July would be deleted from history.
A year later, she points a finger at government.
The person to be blamed is government. Had he created more jobs, none of this would have happened. Because if people were at work, none of this would have happened. The majority of us living in the locations don't have jobs.
That was the only option I could.
While community members helped to clean up, in the days after the looting, the pain of loss is still overwhelming. Life seems to be returning back to normal slowly, but the fear of a repeat of July 2021 lingers. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News.
Yeah, well, that insert there by my colleague Nozintombi Mia, of course, looking at the year since one of the most devastating times in the history of our country, and the pain and the suffering caused during that 8 days in July last year. Many people still seeking closure. Of course, the families of those who unfortunately lost their lives, over 350 people losing their lives in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Let's continue our discussion with now. I'm joined by our political analyst, Mam Precious Lukayeni. I was just listening, Mam Precious, to this piece that has been put together by our colleague Nozintombi Mia on the families of the victims, of those people that lost their lives during those unfortunate days in July last year. And I know that so much the focus has been on the economy, granted, because people are desperate for jobs, their lives are on standstill. But this today is also a day to remember those people that have lost their lives and these families that need justice. In any minute now, the justice or security cluster is going to be having a briefing. You were saying earlier on that our government has not been transparent, and that if they knew who or what was behind the July unrest, they would have said it by now. What do we expect? Or do you feel that today, this briefing by the justice or the security cluster, is it going to shed any more light from what we already know?
And I think it should, but it may not. Because if you remember, during the unrest last year, the departments were blaming each other. It will be interesting to hear today what the security cluster is going to say. Because also what that unrest actually showed was that communities tended to protect certain areas themselves because there was no security in those areas. And it was sometimes it was an ugly scene where you would see people protecting whatever business, they standing there with guns and those kinds of things. I think it is important that the security cluster comes clean to the people of South Africa. So in Phoenix, for example, there is an accusation that some people were just coming from work on their daily business and they were shot. So we need the security cluster to clarify those kinds of things, because that is how people will actually get closure. Of course, we have been concentrating on the economy because that is what we thought is important for the livelihoods of the people. But also people lost lives, and the families of those people need to know exactly what happened. For example, a person who is claimed to have been coming from work but was shot dead. So we need to know who shot that person and where is that person now. Not only that the victims will find closure, and also the country will know what happened.
And there were some people, I mean, the security cluster or the justice cluster might say that some people were arrested. But, for example, let's recap. We know that the former Ukhozi FM DJ, Ngizwe Mchunu, he was arrested. We know that the former Feast Must Fall leader, Bonkosi Kanyile, he was also arrested. And one of Spiti, a lady who goes by the name of her social media name goes by the name of Spiti, also arrested in Johannesburg. But do you think those three individuals, yes, they were arrested and court processes continued, but do you think these are the real people? Those were the 12 that the government was speaking about? Because surely, if you look at the extent and to some extent how organized in some areas this violence was, some people might say there are other people behind this.
Well, I don't believe that those three could have instigated the whole province to protest and loot businesses. But also we must understand, Ayanda, that a protest starts and it takes a life of its own.
Yeah.
If the government says there are 12 people, who are those people? We need to know the 12. That is what we need. But that is the only three that we know, and we think the court cases are underway and their issues is sub judice. But we need to know who is the 12, and when did the government become aware of the instigators? It doesn't matter how many they are, but we need to know when did the government know that they are instigators. And the court cases are underway. We cannot comment on those because I think they are sub judice for now.
Yes. Well, we'll wait and see, of course, what happens with this briefing. Of course, I'm sure across South Africa, people are going to be glued to their screens to hear what is the update from government leaders insofar as security and what happened during those days in July. Many questions that we as journalists are also getting, which people are waiting. People want the government to answer. But more than that, people want to see also moving forward that the weaknesses in the state, the weaknesses that we heard of with the police not having enough capacity and the resources to be able to respond. Granted, the level of destruction and the protests among precious, I think, granted, some might say they would not have been able to effectively assist in that situation, or be able to curtail that situation due to how it had spread across the province of KwaZulu-Natal and, of course, also spilling over into Gauteng. There was simply not enough police officers to be able to respond to the situation on the ground.
I think that's what I said earlier, Ayanda, that there wasn't enough security personnel on the ground. Some businesses were being looted and they were burning down, and there was not a sign of a security police in front of those. Even the army came late. By the time the army was deployed, the damage had already occurred. But we need, from that security cluster, we need to hear them say we did not have capacity to. They must not spin it. That's what I don't like. They must not spin that, because South Africans were here when that thing happened. So when they spin it, South Africans will know. They must not spin it. They must be honest and said, we were not aware, we did not have enough capacity to deal with it, or maybe we did not get enough or instructions early to respond, something along those lines. But this must not be something that is spinned and look beautiful.
Something important that Father Studuzo spoke to us, Father Madlala spoke to us, was telling me when we were chatting to him earlier on. And quite scary though, because he's saying that on the ground, particularly youth, they are despondent. They've lost hope. And he's saying that there still has to be a lot of work that needs to be done. He's saying that one young person approached him and said to him, but Father, your prayers alone will not put food in my tummy.
Which is true.
And so, you know, he's painting a very honest but scary picture of the situation on the ground. And I think what we're trying to get to today, and the message that we're trying to get, is a situation like what we saw last year must not happen again. But I got quite worried by what he was saying, what the attitude and the mood is of people on the ground. What would be your thoughts on that?
My take on that, Ayanda, is that the youth is angry and disappointed. Remember, unemployment in this country is too high, and the greater percentage of the unemployed is the young people. So the government should do something to make sure that that anger is dealt with. Look, when I spoke to you earlier, our conversation as a country about unemployment doesn't give much hope that we shall resolve unemployment quickly. We need proper conversations. What is the type of unemployment we have? What can we do to deal with that type of unemployment? And also, what can be done to open opportunities for young people? Look, these young people have been promised a better life, which is yet to come to others.
And given now the current economic crisis that we are in, the fuel price increase, the high cost of living at this point, and this mood or people not being happy with the current situation, people are struggling to survive, should we be worried that we don't find ourselves, back into a situation where people out of desperation decide, let's go back, let's loot, let's go out and be violent?
I think the media has a role to play there. So we don't stand here and say people are allowed to go and loot because they are hungry. I think that is where the media should play a role. Yeah. The media should not create an impression that it is okay to loot when you are hungry. It is okay to loot when you are unhappy. Because if you loot, that uncle of yours or that mom of yours who's the only one working at home is going to lose their job, and then you're going to be more hungry. I think there should be no way of justifying what happened last year to happen again. Yeah,
definitely. An important point you say there, Mam Precious, because, and I was saying to Father Madala as well, that what we saw during that looting could not have just been driven by poverty. No. I mean, you were saying we were looking at the cars that people were driving as they were stealing from, the different businesses as well. People hired taxis to go to certain areas, we are told. So that must tell you that it could not have been solely driven by poverty, that there were some criminal elements as well in that. But we need to, Father was saying, we need to work together. He finds that at this point there's still groups that are working in silos. There has not been this integration of people working together. He comes from an area in Nanda which we know has high unemployment rate, challenges, socio-economic challenges, and for him he's saying that there needs to be a better work and coordination between government, between civil society, between communities, that it can't be the responsibility of just one group.
That is true, but for that to happen, we need social cohesion.
Yeah.
People at the top must be prepared to work together. And also that working together will be driven by trust. Maybe Father is trusted in the area where he is, but if he brings in somebody from government, people may rise and say, don't bring this one. So I think there's a lot of the loss of trust in government by the people. I think that the government has to build that trust amongst the people.
I know today has sounded like a doom and gloom. I mean, we've been looking back and talking about the challenges that still exist in society, and indeed they still do. But on a positive note, a few weeks ago or last month it was, when there were reports of a national shutdown. And because of what happened last year, people were so petrified as to what was going to happen. I remember in the streets of Durban, businesses decided to not take chances. They closed. Parents decided to keep their kids away from school. They didn't go to work. It was a complete, the town came to a complete standstill because people were so scared, and understandably so. But what also came out of that, and I'm sure you followed that in our reports, Mam Precious, was, for example, in an area like Georgetown, west of Durban, in Hammersdale, where taxi drivers and community members came out when there were those attempts by certain groupings to want to loot a local mall. They then came out to say it's not going to happen, and they protected those businesses.
I think that is important. That is what people have learned from the looting. The taxi people have learned, for example, that if they allow businesses like this one to be looted, they will lose money themselves because there will be nobody coming to this business. And now that to talk about communities protecting their own. In the Eastern Cape, there was no looting because the taxi people stood up and said there's going to be no looting here, because if you loot, you're going to take money from us. But that is the positive that came from here, that people have learned that violence and destruction doesn't help in the long run.
All right, I'm going to leave it there for now. Mam Precious Lukayeni, our political analyst, we add on a good note for now. Positive that some communities are saying never again, it's not going to happen, and we are going to go out and defend our businesses and defend our communities from any unfortunate incidents that could happen. For now, we're going to leave it here from KwaMashu and take things back to you in studio.
Ayanda Mhlongo there for you. Of course, she's doing the rolling coverage with Vusi, Khumalo, as well as all the colleagues in Simphiwe, Makhanya in KwaZulu-Natal.